Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Thursday, February 6, 2025. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
And Washington commentary columnist Matthew Cottonetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
So yesterday afternoon at the White House, to great fanfare, Donald Trump had the layup of all time in signing the executive order banning biologically born males from participating in girls' sports. I say this is the layup of all time because this is something like an 80% issue in polling. And Democrats and liberals have not only ceded this field, which they could very easily have made into a non-issue simply by going along with the rational reality of what we're talking about here, but have handed Republicans and conservatives and people who are interested in sort of culture war issues on the right a gigantic baseball bat to smash them repeatedly over the head with until they go crying off in the corner. And they seem to have no understanding that as they continue to go where they're going, that this is an issue that will keep on giving. This is not the end of the conversation about this, because it is so, in fact, popular, not only but and an door opening into all of the conversations about the liberal leftist embrace of the very redefinition of what it means to be human, that I think is the secret sauce of the 2024 election in ways that people don't even begin to realize. Matt?
Right. I had that thought as well watching the signing ceremony for the executive order yesterday. The White House staged the signing very effectively, surrounding Trump with women and girls. And when Trump went down to sign the executive order, he kind of paused and he asked the girls, the younger girls especially, to come in and surround him. And they did. And it's just, the pictures are just extraordinary. And when I was watching this and looking at these images, I thought that the transgender issue was where the whole structure of wokeism began to break down. That when DEI, affirmative action, it's tied to long-standing issues in the American polity, right? It's about America's relation with the Black minority, the legacy of slavery, segregation, and continued poverty among Black communities in the inner cities. And so the woke movement began as the next iteration of the fight for Black equality. That's how the sympathizers of wokeism understood it, right? Now, when you looked at what was happening early on with Black Lives Matter, you could see that this was much more radical, and that it would lead to defund the police or abolish ICE or the jailbreak movement, right? But on the surface, especially for the people who put those signs out in their front lawns saying, "In this house, we believe in all the good things and unicorns and rainbows and fairies," that's how it appealed. But then as the wokening continued, and especially under Biden, who allowed this ideology to just run rampant throughout the federal government, it pressed on this question of human nature, of whether you were born. It's in the Bible. It's right there in Genesis, man and woman, right? And that was too much. And once you refuse to accept the woke definition of gender fluidity, once you say, "What are you talking about?" And moreover, that is harmful. It's harmful. It's for minors in particular, when you try to impose it on them, the whole superstructure begins to fall apart. And I think that was where the radicals and the Democrats went too far and created the conditions for this Trump revolution.
I watched the ceremony. I agree, it was extraordinary. And I suddenly had this other thought, which was that When I first got into conservative thought and sort of discovering it, one of the fun things about it intellectually was that counterintuitive ideas could turn out to be correct. For example, it's intuitive when you see someone who doesn't have money, you think, oh, well, then we should provide for them, give them money. But turns out that that has unintended consequences downstream, and maybe it's not such a good idea. And that's the conservative counterintuitive idea. And it was a double-edged sword because it's interesting and it's right, but it made it harder for people to come to your side because it requires an extra leap sort of in the chain of thinking. Suddenly, conservative thought is intuitive thought now. Um, the radicals on the left have made it that easy. There is nothing more intuitive than saying girls will play with girls, boys will play with boys. The sex that you are is the sex that you are. Um, and I think you could see this on a host of issues now, which I think explains sort of conservatism under Trump and why, for the first time in so long, more people self-identify as Republicans than as Democrats. Um, they've sort of turned this intuitive counterintuitive problem on its head.
Right. Okay. So I think both are the intuitive and the counterintuitive are both working together here a little bit. So Abe, you're right that one of the great lessons of, I don't know, political science or social science or something, as laid out in neoconservatism, beginning with the origination of the publication of the Public Interest Quarterly in 1965, was, yeah, poverty programs may actually exacerbate poverty. That's counterintuitive, but why that happens turns out to be entirely intuitive. If you give somebody $100 rather than him making the $100, that $100 will be worth less to him than the money made by the sweat of his brow, and he will be less careful with it. He will husband it less. He will expect another $100 payment later. And all of that is perfectly intuitive.
It was perfectly
Because,
logical. I don't know that's perfectly
okay, logical, but I mean, fine, perfectly logical. But it also comports, right, in that sense, with everybody's experience. Somebody gives you something as opposed to something that you had to work to earn. It means less to you. It just that's like, being a human being. And similarly, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I just remember the Fox Butterfield effect that James Tranto always used to
Yeah.
put in his Best of the Web column, where Fox Butterfield was the New York Times crime reporter, and during the '90s, when crime was finally falling thanks to conservative policies, Fox Butterfield would write an article with the headline, um, "Prison population increases despite fall in crime."
Yeah.
So
Right. Right. Right.
that's counterintuitive to liberals, but for conservatives, it's extremely, yeah.
Right.
If you put the criminals in jail,
Right.
you'll have less crime.
But that is a fantastic example of the way in which being counterintuitive then becomes counterintuitive.
Right.
In other words, like you become so blinded by ideology that you fail to see the disaster in logic that you are presenting to people very earnestly, as Fox Butterfield was being very earnest. I mean, why are we putting so many people in jail when crime is falling? Right.
It's like,
QED. I mean, literally, that is what the term QED means. And I think that the gender ideology thing is achieves. So I think, Matt, you're right. You're saying, look, where wokeness started, which was with race. Race and the problem of the way the country has handled African Americans and Black people is our original stain. It remains the American original stain. Everybody pretty much agrees that it's an original stain, unless you're some kind of neo-Nazi or neo-Confederate or some real freak figure on the very far extreme. And so things that connect to that are immediately have heft and weight.
We want people to have equal rights in this country.
Right. And that, of course, is also what explains some of the not pre-wokeness in terms of the expansion of rights from the 60s onward,
Right.
from gender egalitarianism in the sense of women should not be paid less than men.
Right.
Women should not be denied senior executive positions in government or in private sector because they're women, because they get pregnant, because they whatever. This system is, we need to make it so
This
that
is
everybody
why
has a,
same-sex marriage succeeded.
and same-sex
It was
marriage,
framed
right.
as equal rights.
Right. It's not fair. You should be able to love whom you love. Government should not be standing in the way of denying people the right to make households of the sort that they want and all of that based on something else. If this was not...
And then trans becomes not equal rights,
Right.
but an imposition.
Right. So all of that is equal rights. We're talking about women, gays, blacks. Even you could say if you believe that there was some sort of systemic discrimination against other minority groups, which we don't have to get into, but there's some logic that, like Hispanics weren't being treated fairly, however you want to look at it, and say that, let's say housing, you need to make sure that people aren't allowed to discriminate in housing, and it's not just against black people or something like that, at least at the state level. Then we get to the definition of what it means to be human, which isn't, what you do with your genital, what you prefer in terms of your sexual congress, but what it means to be human. And that is what the definition of human is, that we divide up between males and females. And a very small number of males may be attracted to men. A very small number of females might be attracted to women.
And not just humans, by the way.
Yeah.
Every single organism on the planet that reproduces sexually,
and
then, male and female.
And then you are asked, and this is very important. This is where, the people use the word Orwellian very loosely and incorrectly, but it is part of Orwell's point about language, the misuse of language, and the totalitarian ideology that is the subject of 1984 is, you are not only asked, but it is demanded of you that you become advocates for and believe in things that you don't believe in, that everything in your being and your system says you do not believe in. Everything says a man is a man, as a woman is a woman. Everything says 2 + 2 = 4. But you know what you have to do in order to be a new kind of person who fits in with the way you are supposed to think? Or you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your house, you're going to lose your wife, you're going to lose everything. Or you might get someone taking a helmet, putting the helmet on your head with a bunch of rats in it who will eat your head off, is to say that 2 + 2 = 5. And increasingly over the course from 2014 or 2015, when Black Lives Matter started, to the present, people in this country, it was demanded of us that we believe things that no one has ever believed before, and that I will say, I believe a generation from now, no one will ever believe again. And it was so fast and it was so successful that I think what it exposed was the hollowness of the people who were making the demand. In other words, not even allowing there to be a debate or discussion over whether or not there was something harmful about an 11-year-old taking puberty blockers, and saying that even that discussion was wrong, and that an entire part of the American political and social spectrum simply accepted as though it was like, I don't know, a speed limit, that this was something that they were supposed to think and believe. That just made, we just reelected a guy who was kind of a pariah in many ways. And he got elected to this unprecedented term because whoever he is and whatever he stood for, he was not that, he was anti that. That's what that visual yesterday was, is I know you all think I'm a rapist. You all think that I abuse women and I pay off porn stars and all of that. But um, I'm not letting a boy into a girl's locker room. What's more important to you? What has more effect on your daily life as an American? How I conducted myself personally, and I'm not defending this. Or I mean, this is obviously not anything he said. This is kind of second order implicit. Or am I here to say those people are crazy and we're driving you crazy and we're starting to make it thinkable and even morally praiseworthy to cut off body parts of 14-year-olds? Who's better? Me, who pardons 1,500 criminals and says that insurrections are okay at the Capitol, or them? And the answer is me. The answer. So when you have a kind of binary choice, he now knows how to face down the binary choice that liberals have foisted. This was not our fight. We didn't
You're muted, Abe.
start this fight.
That would explain why no one was listening to me. When just wanted to kind of augment what you're both saying here. The Orwellian stuff did begin before the trans part of the wokeness came to the fore. For example, the mostly peaceful riots. Right. I mean, that's a sort of textbook example.
Yes.
Where you're being asked to look at 2 + 2 and pronounce it.
Or the remember the professor, the Mizzou professor, who said we need some muscle over here.
Oh yeah,
against this Asian American student who's, I think, just watching this protest. It was a BLM protest. Yeah, so there was
2015, right?
That was 2015 too,
and a professor sicking a mob on a kid.
And the whole Yale incident with the Halloween costumes, right?
Mrs. Christoph.
Right. So you had these kind of previews, but it really, in my view, it really took trans to just say to the American people, whoa, this has got to stop.
And we have so many other examples, right? I mean, and indeed, the virtue being that you argue something that is on its face either offensive or crazy or wrong. Calling Jews Nazis is one of those.
Right.
Saying that Israel is committing a genocide in an area where the population is growing is another. And the demand that you not only accept that argument, but that you echo it and parrot it, and then walk around at demonstrations expressing your solidarity with it.
And become violent when you're challenged.
That is a very important part of creating, enforcing, and advancing an orthodoxy. But and this is true, has been true forever, but when it really is, we are going to make you argue something that is not true. That's what we want. What we want is for you. And by the way, Trump people do this too, crowd size, stuff like that. Argue something that your eyes show and everybody knows implicitly is wrong. That's the best way to create fidelity and fealty for the larger cause. If you are willing to surrender your common sense and your sort of good understanding of something for the supposedly larger point, or to fight the bad guys on the other side or something like that, then they have you. Then you are part of this other mob. And it's old, right? I mean, there's one of the great examples in philosophical history, let's just say, of the trans thing is the transcendentalists, not to use the word trans, this is a different spelling, right? The transcendentalists, American philosophers of the 19th century, right, were obsessed and consumed with the question of, following Bishop Berkeley and stuff, what was anything real? Is there reality, or is there not real? What is nature? Who are we in nature? Is there anything real, or something like that? And the two great examples of the refutation of these ideas was when Bishop Berkeley in 18th century London said, "How do we know how do we know that there is a reality and that everything that was going on isn't just something in our own heads that we're creating as we go?" And somebody said to Samuel Johnson, "How do you refute Bishop Berkeley?" And there's a stone on the ground, and he kicked it with his foot, and then he said, "I refute it thus." That's a rock. You know it's a rock. I know it's a rock. When I kick it, it hurts my foot. I refute it by the simple fact of the rock. And then in America in the 19th century, the transcendentalist philosopher Margaret Fuller, at the end of her life, said, "I accept the universe," to which Samuel Carlyle, the British essayist, thinker, whatever, said, "By gad, she'd better." If you can get people to refute reality, and that's a very impressive act of brainwashing, but it will have this terrible negative consequence to everybody else who says, "That's a rock. What the hell are you talking about? A girl is a girl, a boy is a boy." And even if you cut off that boy's genitalia, he is still a boy. You may put silicon breast implants in his chest. You may give him estrogen. You may do all kinds of things. His DNA says he's male.
So can I say what this also reveals, this whole history that we're talking about, and that's the weakness of mainstream liberalism. You know, I'm
You
not
should
going to
define here what you're talking about.
exactly. I'm not going
Liberal sounds very
post-liberal here. I don't want to make sure people understand. I believe in freedom, equality before the law, constitutionalism. However, there was an argument being made throughout this whole period that said the problem is mainstream liberals, liberal elites, people who have, typical democratic social, cultural, economic views, foreign policy views, simply don't have the spine to stand down these radical challenges. And, they were right. That argument was right, because when BLM came along, it took over the Democratic Party, and it led to an attitude toward crime and public safety that was catastrophic. And when trans came along, the Democratic Party folded too. And not only folded, but was willing to use the machinery of government that policed civil rights against people who dissented from the trans line. And just as we saw in the 60s, when that era's radicals, the Black Power movement, the anti-war movement, the campus movement, and counterculture challenged liberalism, mainstream liberalism in the Democratic Party, and the mainstream liberals and Democrats folded. The same thing happened this time. And in both cases, the collapse of mainstream liberalism created a conservative counter-revolution. And I think that's what we're beginning to see happening here. And it makes it to be a very exciting time to be alive.
It is very, very hard for moderation to fight. Moderation is the avoidance of, or the argument that fighting is unnecessary, and that reason, free and fair discussion, and rational understanding will lead us into a common good. That's what moderation is, right? I mean, and so I remember in the early '90s when Joe Klein began talking about this incredible phenomenon of the radical middle. The radical middle. People in this country are angry. They're angry and they're furious and they're so angry and they're angry, but they're all in the middle. And in a funny way, you can't really be angry and be in the middle, because if you're angry, You're angry at someone or something or some cause or some idea. And then you line yourself up against it. And wherever you're aligned, it's not in the middle. The middle is, well, that idea has some good parts and it has some bad parts. It's sort of like obviously aggressive efforts to recruit talented minority people to jobs, being very aggressive about it. As long as you're not unfair to other people, that's good. That's affirmative action. That's the moderate position on affirmative action. And in the end, nobody held it. I mean, everybody sort of holds it, but nobody really held it, because if this was something you cared about, either it was like, well, the hell with that. What we need is 20% of the boardroom has got to be black. Or don't you count that way? What about my kid is white? Does that mean he's not going to get into law school just so your kid
Or
can get into law school with worse scores and worse grades?
this reminds
Not
me.
fair. Right.
So
Okay.
I had a conversation with a friend who I think thinks of himself as being somewhere in the middle. Soon after that video of the California firewoman circulated, right?
I mean, the one where she explains that you're safer when the person who is trying to
It
save you from the fire
looks like
you.
you. And
Yeah.
if a guy is found, and if people ask me, can I lift a guy out of a fire? I say, if you're in the middle of a fire, you're in the wrong place. And his response was, I think you can do it both. You can hire all the women, all the trans firefighters you want, and still have security. And I said, well, no, you can't. There is always a trade-off. And in terms of the radical middle and why you can't have it, John, it reminds me of my favorite quote from your mother, which I probably used more than any other quote, which is, at some point you have to join the side you're already on.
Right. But you don't even know you're on the side.
Right.
What happened here is that people are driven to a side. This fight was entirely unnecessary. The damage done to liberalism, leftism, and all this by trans was an unnecessary fight for them. But the fact that liberals and Democrats had no antibodies to fight this disease that entered into their bloodstream is the salient point. And I'll give you another example here off this scale. So in 2019, what happened? Ilhan Omar, I can't remember if it was Rashida Tlaib or Ilhan Omar, said that so the squad comes into existence in 2018 with the 2018 election, and there are 4, maybe 5 members of Congress, right? Was it 4? Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley,
and AOC.
4. And Ilhan Omar said, with the Jews, it's all about the Benjamins. Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, most powerful woman ever in American politics, thought to be the most effective leader, sort of political leader of a party in the last 25 years, at least in this frame, brought together the House Democratic Caucus with the idea that they would issue a note of censure or disapproval for what Rashida Tlaib had said. And she lost. People started having temper tantrums in the conference room about why were we attacking each other when Donald Trump is out there being evil? We need to stick together and not do this.
Yeah.
She thought it was a gimme. She was doing this to take this story out of the public, right, and to kind of cauterize a wound before it actually started to suppurate.
I remember around that time, Robert Kagan wrote an essay for the Washington Post where he said you have to be on the squad side because Trump is against the squad. So Trump changed this whole picture too.
Okay, so let's rerun history. So let's go back to 2019, and for reasons that we don't really understand, whatever happened in that room didn't happen. And the House passes a resolution of censure for Ilhan Omar. Now, granted, I'm making a stretch here because we're talking 4 years before October 7th. But does America, do the campuses, do the elites explode in the same way in 2023 if this originating wound in the halls of Congress was in fact cauterized sealed up, and the people who were guilty for it faced some punishment and were worried about doing it the next time? Or was that the message that there would be no consequences on the left for rhetoric and ideas like that, and that itself, allowed this pool, this septic pool, to grow and fester and get more and more diseased? I don't
Oh,
have
I
an
think
answer.
I know. I think you're onto something. I don't think it's a direct line, as you said, but I think that it's a data point, and there's a bunch of contributing data points. Because there were many instances of squad members saying things and doing things along these lines, and they all got a pass every time. The worst that they would face, would be like a call for them to be more educated on the historical plight of the Jews or something like that,
Right.
and that it created altogether an atmosphere that certainly allowed for this. Yeah.
But
And I would just back up a little bit more,
yeah.
John,
Okay, yeah.
which is I do think the role of Trump is critical here because BLM, same-sex marriage are established in Obama's second term, and in Obama's second term, there's still this sense that history is directional. History is pointing us toward Obama's vision of what equality looks like and what freedom looks like. And it turns out that about half the country is willing to vote for someone who rejects that vision. And I'd say more than half the country rejected it, but because of Trump and Trump's newness and Trump's flaws, he got about 48% of the vote, 47% of the vote, but still won. And that victory confirmed for the radicals their view of what America was. And so after Trump wins,
In need of
radical change, right? Because that was Ta-Nehisi Coates's cover story for The Atlantic after Trump wins, is that this is a white supremacist who has won the presidency. And so we need a complete uprooting. And again, mainstream Democrats, the Pelosi's of the world, had already kind of buckled to Ta-Nehisi Coates as the intellectual of the era.
Right.
And so when he said that, they said, oh, okay. And so here comes AOC and here comes Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, and they start spewing awful things about the United States and about Jews and about Israel. And the Democratic Party doesn't know what to, Trump.
But my point here is we will tend to think, or sort of, not we, but sort of Republicans, or sort of the standard issue Republicans would tend to think, there's Nancy Pelosi, she's a far left San Francisco Democrat, you can see, but she's everything, and that's a misapprehension. Not that I'm saying anything nice about Nancy Pelosi. She represents the shift in the Overton window here, which is to say, she was a conventional Democratic left liberal. Anti-Semitism sprouted up in the caucus that she was managing, and her impulse was to tamp it down and to snuff it out because the consequences of it could be dire. And that was the first moment at which that's the liberalism that, Matt, you're talking about, that was toothless or lost its capacity to have any kind of moral suasion over the rest of the country.
How about Joe Biden, who became president trans?
Right.
I mean, this is a guy who spent his
Catholic,
career
daily communicant at mass. He's holding his rosary.
Yeah.
Right?
Suddenly he's holding trans celebrations at the White House. He's declaring Easter Trans Recognition Day. I see
Admiral Levine at the HHS.
Yeah. Sam, Mr. Nuclear
Binion.
Energy, Sam Binion.
Yeah. Luggage.
Energy,
the luggage lover.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, all of this is real. I'm just saying that liberalism itself, it's not that there isn't a world in which common sense liberals were could have, had they had enough cultural support structure, could have somehow stood against the bad guys. But once battle lines were drawn, and this is where the 60s are very much a fantastic analogy of this. You mentioned Bob Kagan's piece about standing with the squad, and I'm going to tell story I told a couple months ago to people about what went on at Cornell when Bob Kagan's father, Don, one of the great historians of the 20th century, classical historian, was a professor at Cornell, and Cornell blew up into, into riot, terrible stuff. And there was a meeting of the good liberals all standing around and, trying to figure out what to do. Should they issue a letter? Should there be this? Should there be that? Something like that. And they were all standing there, and you could sort of imagine the image out of some stupid movie. They're all standing there in their corduroy jackets with the patches on the elbows, with their pipes and their little beards, and they're sort of discussing what they could or could not do. And Myrna Kagan, who was a housewife raising her kid, not an academic herself, said, "I just have one question for you people. Where are the men? Where are the men? Stand up. Where are the men?" And Don left Cornell and went to Yale because he couldn't bear what was going on there. Where are the men? And so this is actually, you're not allowed to talk that way about this. Right?
That kind of proves the point. You can't say that in the Democratic Party.
Right. But I mean, who's standing for principle? And this is the problem with the radical middle and moderation, all of that, which is that moderation and calmness and, my sort of tranquility becomes the end goal in itself, right? It's the thing that is most important. And so if the radicals are coming at you, you sort of say, can't we just have a cup of coffee? And then they take a 2x4 and they smash you in the head with it. They're a little more afraid of the people who are the ones who are the men who are standing up. They know that they're going to get a fight. They're going to get a fight back. Why do you think Democrats are so scared of Trump right now? Why do you think liberals are all reeling from what Trump is doing? Because what they were used to is institutions of power in the United States kowtowing to them. And now there's this president standing there who is saying, not only am I not kowtowing to you when you say, oh, federal workers are scared, you can't do this to U.S. foreign aid. What's going to happen to the anti-malarial drugs that I notice mysteriously have all stopped flowing just because somebody said USAID is going to move to state, or they're suspending and pausing programs? You mean there weren't any anti-malarial drugs in the medicine cabinet to be distributed throughout Africa? This just happened last week.
Well,
you
maybe
guys
this
are all a bunch of liars. It's not when they said we're suspending programs until we can figure out what's going on. It's not like there weren't 2 billion doses of anti-malarial
and there are
drugs.
also exceptions. There are exceptions for these life-saving programs, we should say. Yeah. But maybe this is the moment to move to what you really wanted to talk about today, which is the state of the Democrats. Yeah. And I'll just set it up by saying that the response to Elon Musk and Doge has been, I'd say, hysterical. I think is a good word to say it, where you have Democrats leading protests outside the Treasury Department, where you have two Democratic congresswomen barging into a private meeting between Speaker Mike Johnson and Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent in the Speaker's office. It is something to behold, and it's all over one agency, USAID, which is a very small part of the federal budget, and yet it seems to be kind of the symbol of everything the Democrats want from government, which is funding NGOs with social justice purposes. I think that's why they're so angry. Is what are you doing, canceling these programs? And to most people, when they hear the programs that are being canceled, I mean, just flights of fancy involving transgenderism or LGBTQ or
a comic book in Paraguay,
comic books in Paraguay, or actually NGOs that oppose governments like El Salvador's that is kind of becoming an ally of ours, right? Most people are like, well, why are we spending that anyway, and yet the Democrats are apoplectic. It's something to behold.
Okay.
Also, I think Musk himself is a part of this. It's very interesting because, as we've said before of Donald Trump this time around, he seems calmer, he seems quieter. Um, Musk is publicly a more obnoxious figure than Trump is right now.
Yeah.
And when he attaches himself to something, he's the one. That's what's going to draw fire, and that's what's
he
happening
is
here.
right now. Talked about this the other day, but like every Republican ascendancy features a figure who becomes the tar baby and is the monster demon villain that everyone can like glom onto and say is the representative figure of the evil of the moment. Biggest, most notorious one being Newt Gingrich after the 1994 Republican victory in the House, but like dating back forever. Like there's always been one. Spiro Agnew was
Cheney,
Agnew. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, so Musk now is the one. It's clearly, and if you read this symposium in the New York Times this morning, in which Frank Bruni, Patrick Healy, Michelle Goldberg, and Brett Stevens discuss the crisis in the Democratic Party, what they all agree is demonize Musk. This is one good way of figuring out how to move forward is everybody hates Elon Musk. He's the one we need to focus on. He's taking over the government. He's stealing all the data from OPM. Okay, so this is an interesting game. We can discuss whether or not what is going on here is good or bad or legal or illegal. But and I don't mean to make light of it, actually, if in fact Trump, who has no interest in legal niceties, and Musk, who seems to be somewhat unsupervised, are doing things that are illegal, that should not be permitted, and bad, things should happen and all of that. But that's not what's going on. What's going on here is Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. People on the left have hated him for years for reasons that I don't entirely understand. Remember, like when he went on SNL and the entire cast said this was disgusting. We shouldn't be having him do this. And this was before he bought Twitter and did all that. So he's a very complex figure in American popular culture. And his approval rating is low, according to Harry Enton and all of that. But he's just doing what Trump said he wants him to do, which is doing a forensic audit of the government. And cleverly, they went at the one thing in the U.S. government to begin with that is the least popular form of spending in the U.S. government. And that's something, by the way, that I'm upset about. Like, I believe in foreign aid. But for 40 years, foreign aid has been the least popular form of federal spending for obvious reasons. Why are we spending it there? We should be spending it here. Why are we giving money to somebody in El Salvador when there's a poor person on the streets in Oklahoma City? That doesn't make any sense. And to make the argument, well, we have soft power and hard power. We need this. It helps us with our soft power and all that. That's an argument at a second or third order level, right? People just don't think their tax dollars should be going to, and by the way, shouldn't be going.
It's what Abe was talking about
Right.
at the top of the show.
Yeah. So here, I just want to read one passage from the story in the Washington Post about the Doge agents who have been going through the computer systems at the Office of Personnel Management. Okay. This is the lead story in the Washington Post. Agents of billionaire Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, right? So it sounds like
Gestapo.
Hugo Weaving in the Matrix, right? Have gained access to highly restricted government records on millions of federal employees as part of a broader effort to wrest control over the government's main personnel agency, according to 4 U.S. officials with knowledge of the developments. The officials, who, like others, spoke on condition of anonymity for fear of reprisal, expressed alarm about potential breaches or abuses of such records by members of an administration whose senior-most officials have threatened to retaliate against federal workers accused of disloyalty. Okay, This is an executive branch agency.
Right.
Officials of the executive branch, at the direction of the president, are looking at the computer programs inside the executive branch of the president
For improper payments
for improper payments
and
things
cost
like that.
savings.
Right. Now, the moves at OPM by members of Musk's pseudo-governmental Doge have coincided with similar efforts to gain access to sensitive systems at other agencies.
Right.
In what way is Doge pseudo-governmental?
Right.
Trump announced there was going to be this Department of Government Efficiency run by Musk. Now, okay, they haven't dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, but they're being given access to these by the people, including confirmed by the Congress Secretary of the Treasury, Scott Bessent, to look at the computers. Records obtained by the Post show that several members of Musk's Doge team, Dash, some of whom are in their early 20s,
Right.
and come from positions at his private companies, and Dash, were given administrative access to OPM computer systems within days of Trump's inauguration last month.
Right.
They're in their early 20s. They're in the, I can't.
They have government computers because
They're
they
government
work,
computers
because
that
they
are-
work for the government. Because the president hired them.
So just to make this clear, the executive branch, there's a new sheriff in town, and he wants to know what's going on in the executive branch of the government. So he's brought in consultants from outside to do an audit of what's going on in the government.
And made them employees of the government. So
Right.
it's not McKinsey.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
not McKinsey.
Right.
It's government employees doing this.
And he's allowed to, and not only is he allowed to, everybody in the country should be like, this should happen every week.
Oh, yeah.
Because according to this thing that I cited last week, according to the Office of Government Accountability, $380 billion are missing from federal coffers and unaccounted for out of a federal budget of $4 trillion. Or excuse me, 260 billion. I'm sorry. It wasn't 380 billion.
Still a lot of money.
So the people who lost the money are saying, you're not allowed to look at these.
Right.
I'm going, and this is where the Democratic Party comes back into it. Are they insane? Because they're standing there having temper tantrums in front of federal buildings, defending federal workers.
They're defending
who
themselves.
Don't want to come back, but they also don't want to come back.
They're the party of government. The Democrats are the party of government. The Democratic Party, as we know it, would not exist without federal support. Right. And the elected officials of the Democratic Party represent the interests of the permanent government in Washington.
Right.
And its ancillary institutions like the teachers' unions or the labor unions, right?
And
so that's why they're so exercised. This is about who's in charge. It's that simple.
Right.
And
Trump's in charge. It's
40 years, though. For 40 years, the Democrats have been in charge of the bureaucracy.
They've been in charge, and Republicans have only glancingly. And by the way, it may still be glancing. This is only it's only 2 weeks into the administration. We don't know how energetic, activist, or thoroughgoing this is going to be in the course of the Trump presidency. He's not very focused.
Remember, it was set up for 2 years.
Right. Okay.
It was originally only supposed to go through the midterm.
Right. But what I'm saying is, we don't know. This is all shock and awe time. And then there's going to actually have to be the incredibly boring spade work of creating, whatever it is you have to create in order to track spending and do this and do that.
Well, that's where I think they have a different view in Doge. Because based on just the reports from Musk and others of his allies, it seems like when they're going through these invoices in the payment systems, I mean, which are extremely, old. I think the 20-year-olds are hitting delete if they see something that they think is outside of what the president's priority is. They're just hitting delete. They're just canceling the payment now. So it's very Musk-like in the sense that when he took over Twitter, what did he do? He fired most of the workforce. He completely opened up the records. He threw everything against the wall to see what sticks, and then he hired back people, or he created new policies based on what he felt was necessary. And this is what Trump has done. Is Trump has said, Elon, do what you do to the companies that you acquire
Right.
to the federal bureaucracy.
Right. Now, look, it could be bad. There could be illegal things going on. Republicans have a 1-seat majority in the House, as I keep saying, one car wreck or one heart attack or something like that. And Democrats could take charge, and then they can have control of the House, and they can use their investigative powers to torment and torture everybody in Doge and everybody in the White House and everybody on the way they handle these matters. And
well, Representative Al Green filed impeachment articles against Trump yesterday.
Thank God. It's only been 2 weeks.
2 weeks. I 2 weeks in.
I was wondering where they were.
I think the Democrats, to maybe make your point, are showing themselves completely at sea here.
Right.
I think we saw it at the DNC. I think when you have in the headlines, in the news, Maxine Waters screaming at the top of her lungs, and figures like J.B. Pritzker talking about how we're not going to let Trump get away with this, it's not good for the Democratic Party.
Right.
These are the voices that do not present well to the American public for the Democrats.
Or Chuck Schumer.
Or Chuck Schumer.
Right. So what does this say? See, what this says to me is, I turned on a podcast I don't ordinarily listen to, Ruthless, which is Comfortably Smug, and Josh Holmes, who used to worked for Mitch McConnell and stuff like this. This wildly popular, very, right, very partisan podcast. And basically it's an hour of them giggling. I'm not joking. Like little clips of Democrats saying things like, "We're not going to let Elon Musk look at our data." It's like, and they're just cracking up because, like, this is their dream. The dream come true is the Democratic Party lining up to say nobody is allowed to look at the books of government.
Right.
Have they lost their minds? I mean, I understand they're on their back foot. It's only a couple of weeks, but this thing I mentioned, this Times colloquium about what's wrong with the Democratic Party. Bret Stephens, who is a contributing editor of Commentary, so just Bret, Michelle Goldberg says, or Patrick Healy, who's running the conversation, says, who in the Democratic Party can lead their way into during this crisis? And Michelle Goldberg says, AOC, Bernie Sanders, and Pete Buttigieg. And Bret, though I don't remember what he says exactly, but it is as though on paper, as you're reading this or on your computer screen, it flashes to Bret, and he is the three people in the front row at the producers, watching the Springtime for Hitler number, who are the three monkeys, right? One with their hand on his mouth, one with hand on his ears, one with hand on his eyes, because he cannot believe what has just come out of her mouth. So yes, by all means, take AOC and make her, and by the way, I do think that she may well be the face of the Democratic Party's future. It's not that's a political proposition that is an outrageous thing to say. That it will be good for the Democratic Party. It's really good if Republicans, if we want some kind of weird reprise of 1972, where Nixon wins by 1.5 or not less than a point in 1968, and then wins by 25 points in 1972. Make AOC the new George McGovern, and let's see how America makes its choice in 2028. So again, it's early, but it's like they're falling into every briar patch every 5 minutes, and they think things like Trump really screwed up with that executive order on X and Y that he had to take back.
But it's also,
nobody's going to remember that. He did it. He took it back 24 hours later. Then he's taking over Gaza. We're at war with Panama. It's like,
which executive order did he take back?
Which person? One of those personnel order, like he issued it, and then
see, I don't even remember it.
You'd remember if I could remember. If I weren't so brain dead, you would know which one I was talking about. But where Caroline Levitt had to say, no, the executive order.
The OMB memo. You mean the OMB memo?
I'm sorry, the OMB memo. I apologize. Yeah, he hasn't rescinded any executive order.
But the thing about the Democrats and the liberals here is this is also just where they're comfortable. This is to do what they would really have to do would take them to a place that is so foreign to them. So what do they know to do? They know to pull their hair out over Trump, over Musk, over what's happened, they know to elevate the loudest voices among them. To have to sort of go and find another voice and then raise that voice up among them to, as Matt has said before, take on their own party. That is so daunting.
It will take time, and it will also be in response to real world conditions. As I say, like if the
payment system at USAID is not the condition that will cause the reevaluation of the Democrats and of Trump. I mean, they're seizing on this as though it's. I will also say though that what's amazing about USAID and the stories out of it is that yes, it's led to hysteria on the left, but I will say there is also some hysteria on the MAGA side about what you would think reading MAGA media that apparently USAID has run not only the entire federal government for the past decade, but also the entire world, the planet. And I think it's an out of control agency. I think you can look at senators like Joni Ernst who have said that they've been trying to get accountability of USAID under Samantha Power, and they were unable to. Secretary of State Rubio, who is now the acting director of USAID, has said the same thing. I agree. I think there's a lot of wasteful spending there, but come on, it's not actually the octopus that has led us to this impasse. It's one piece of the federal machinery that needs to be reined in.
Also, that this used to be a shtick of Congress. One of the things that congressmen who were interested in, being responsible budgeteers, William Fulbright, various others, would every year dig through when Congress got the federal budget.
Wasteful.
It says find, the Cowboy Poetry Museum.
Rand Paul does it now.
Right. Yeah. But it was always a House thing, and it was this. You won't believe what's buried in this budget.
And we need to change it.
And we need to change it. The budget is now 40% larger than it was just like 8 years ago.
And clearly on autopilot.
Right. And as I said, hundreds of billions of dollars are missing. And you know what the word missing means? It means stolen.
Yeah. Well, think about all the fraud.
In a bank account somewhere. Fraud. Right. Yeah.
The COVID money, hundreds of billions of dollars was fraudulently paid because of COVID. And what's interesting is, and
we're not even talking about that, right? You're talking about fraud that we know has happened. We're talking about missing money.
Right, missing money. Right, that's a separate thing you're bringing. But I'll just say to kind of close on this is, remember the first time Trump ran, and in his first presidency, he said, well, he was going to cut the deficit by targeting waste, fraud, and abuse, which is an old kind of canard and trope of political discourse going back decades. Again, the difference between Trump 1 and Trump 2, well, this time he actually has an instrument to go after waste, fraud, and abuse. Yeah. And it's happening in real time these first 2 weeks. And it's setting off this alarm bell in the night for the Democratic Party, but it could also produce some real savings for the taxpayer.
So Michelle Goldberg, just to finish this up, Michelle Goldberg is like, where's the response? And and on the one hand, she says, where's the response? Everyone's depressed because Democrats aren't responding right. And Trump is just running roughshod over everything. He's installing, fascist regime. And on the other hand, she says, politics is homeostatic. look, we went from Trump to Biden to Trump. Who knows where we'll be in 2 years or in 4 years? That's not knowable, and you need to be calm. So she both is hysterical and calm at the same point. And her second point is correct, and her first point is not. If the Democratic Party were willing to say it's Trump's honeymoon, he's doing all this stuff, we're regrouping, he's throwing all these lines in the wall. We're going to say what he's doing is bad. But the minute that things start to go wrong, we're organizing ourselves for the minute things actually start to go wrong, and where he does things that are unpopular or that are injurious, or he mishandles or is incompetent. And then we're going to pounce. And, it's better to be prudent about pouncing instead of pouncing on everything, or even pouncing on things that are popular. There's a long way to go until the next election. I mean, it's 2 years. There's 4 years until the next presidential election. Keep your powder dry. If you're going to go off like psychotic lunatics, you're helping him. You're making his case for him. So don't do it. But of course, she also has to say the exact opposite at the same time, which is, this is an unprecedented act of autocratic fascism that Trump is using Elon Musk as his battering ram, the richest man in the world who is outside of all law and whatever. And so they're just at sea, and the Ruthless podcast is giggling, and the giggling is the right response, in my view. Now, I have to finish up by doing a rare disrecommends, and Matt Continetti is going to laugh at me and wag his finger and say, I told you so.
Now I can giggle.
Okay. So Monday, I think it was Monday, I made a recommendation of a show on, I believe...
Or Tuesday. You made it Tuesday because I wasn't on the show.
Called Paradise, with Sterling K. Brown and James Marsden as an ex-president and the Secret Service agent that is his close friend. And I said, I watched the first episode, and it has this crazy twist at the end of the first episode. And I didn't see it coming, and I thought, wow, this is pretty good.
And then what? And then you texted me to tell me to watch it right away.
And he did. And then
I did.
Matt sent me...
As did I.
Okay, and then Matt said, hold on. So you guys, no, but here's why I have to do a disrecommend. So that's this crazy twist. I shouldn't reveal it. Maybe
No.
Okay, I'm not going to reveal it. But I then watched, there are 3 other episodes up. So I watched the 3 other episodes, which I believe you guys both stopped at the end of the pilot.
Oh, yes.
Having not been amused by the twist that I was amused by, shall we say.
Or
I
even
watched on a little bit.
Okay.
Yep.
Do not watch Paradise.
I believe what I said. I replied to you after watching the premiere. Yeah. That On Call, which you have also recommended.
Last week's recommendation. Right?
Last week's recommendation, On Call, was greater than Paradise.
And I agreed with that at the time. But the degree to which it is greater than Paradise is
you didn't anticipate.
Beyond all reckoning. I have this... The 3 subsequent episodes, and there are like 4 more to go. The level of preposterousness has achieved.
I can only imagine.
Yeah.
Plan 9 from outer space type levels, like Ed Wood type level.
Alas, no, because that would be a little more amusing than what's here.
But all the knotted up intrigues also is just...
Yeah, there's a lot of intrigue.
Well, look, John, the problem with the show is that James Marsden's president is so completely implausible. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's so ridiculous. The drinking and the cigarette.
That's
not
the problem with the show. He's drinking and having the cigarette because something apocalyptic. He knows too much.
I see. Yeah, okay. I see. He's shaken to his core.
So he's more like... Right. Oh boy. And then when they reveal what's happened,
the secret,
and what's going on. Yeah. But then they reveal the secret at the end of the first episode, and there's a big reveal. Then you have to live in the world after it's been revealed. And that is just
ridiculous.
Comical in the
So there was one thing, let me just ask you this. There's one thing in the premiere that I thought maybe had potential, and that was when it was revealed that James Marsden's dad was played by Gerald McRaney.
Okay. we haven't seen him. Gerald McRaney, one of the great television actors,
Yeah.
Sort of like weirdly never had like that moment where everyone went, "Oh my God, is Gerald McRaney the greatest thing ever?"
Kind of happened with Deadwood, but even that
Deadwood,
was
but there were like 4 or 5 different shows. He was
right.
the guy who played Major
Major
Dad on a
Dad.
sitcom many, many years ago, and he was in Simon and Simon. And then when he became like 60 years old, he was suddenly like the best TV actor who had ever lived. But and we've only seen him like we haven't seen any more of him.
Oh, there you go.
I
So
don't
that
know why.
explains
But
it.
even
Yeah.
that is not
Right.
worth the time. But yes, instead of watching Paradise, go to IMDb, look up Gerald McRaney, see whatever else he's been in the last 10 years, and watch that because he's amazing.
Can I make a more general complaint here about shows that I've noticed recently when I've been watching these scripted shows? And Paradise does this. They make it so that the most prominent 10 characters, we have to go on a journey with each one.
I know.
You know what I mean?
They're boring.
And they're boring, and then each journey has to connect up to the main plot in some.
Oh, there's so many flashbacks.
This is right. So that's for that we can thank Lost.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
That Lost was ruinous.
Lost had 20 characters, and then every episode took you into somebody else's past, so you discovered what happened to them before they got to the island that makes them suspicious.
Can I just briefly make a disrecommendation of my own, which was connected to our text conversation about Paradise, which is, over the holidays, there was a lot of coverage of this film Carry On Netflix, starring Taron Egerton, and about a TSA agent and Jason Bateman is the villain, gets caught up in this terrorist plot. And so I thought, okay, this looks like a great concept, and so I started watching it, and I began to have second thoughts about the movie when one of the main bad guys appears wearing a red cap, right? No writing on the red cap, but I guess that'd be 2 on the nose. So it's just a red cap. And so, okay. But then I had to turn it off. I could not finish the movie when it is revealed. And I'm going to spoil it here for everybody because it's not worth watching.
Go ahead.
When it's revealed that, the true enemies who are going to use a chemical agent on this airliner in order to kill the reformist member of Congress are the weapons manufacturers. Yeah, the weapons manufacturers are doing it. And I say, can really? I mean, can't they come up with some new right-wing villains? Some kind of new type of thing. Even Goldfinger kind of had his own stuff, his own mishigas. It's kind of creative, right? They can't do it. It just has to be the defense contractors. And then I turned off the movie.
Okay, so now I'll make a recommend and then we'll be done, because based off of Carry On, which I also stopped watching, is that Carry On is a weird corkscrew remake or ripoff of a movie from 15 years ago called Red Eye with Cillian Murphy and Rachel McAdams. And the setup in these movies, and there's another movie called Phone Booth and something like that, is a person is forced by circumstance to become an ordinary person is forced by circumstance to become an assassin. That's the gimmick is an assassin forces a person to be his weapon. And so it's of course it's a ridiculous setup. So the question is, how do you create the world in which that person has no choice but to try to enact what the villain wants while trying to figure out how to screw up and foil the villain's plan. So it is a very high degree of difficulty that is set up by plots like this for obvious reasons.
Collateral is, in my view, the best example.
Right.
Does it the best.
Right. That's Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx. And Red Eye is another one. Anyway, Red Eye is really good.
Okay.
And Cillian Murphy, this is, 15 years before he was Oppenheimer, and Rachel McAdams, who was an absolute angel of an actress. And I don't know where it is, but if you just Google Red Eye streaming, I'm sure it's available. might even be on Tubi by now for totally for free. And that if you liked Carry On, or even if you had our experience with Carry On, this is so much better. Even if you like Carry On, that you should try Red Eye. Okay, we've gone a very long time just for the three of us. We'll be back. We'll be back tomorrow for Abe and Madam John.